The most overpaid player from every NBA team. I've made one of these every year and it's definitely needed because as we've seen, a lot can change in a year. Players change teams and some teams just never learn to stop overpaying. So let's look at some from every team, starting with the Atlanta Hawks, who's probably the team with the worst 3 contracts out of any team, because this summer they took on Allen Crabbe's $18 million deal, Evan Turner's $18 million a year, and their most overpaid player and one of the most overpaid in the league for the past 3 seasons in Chandler Parsons, who's going to be making $25 million this season. We all know that Chandler's contract is terrible, and the fact that he's only played 96 total games since signing it in 2016 makes it that much worse. And I wouldn't expect anything to change this season either. Next to Chandler Parsons though, with how things currently sit on the Celtics, Gordon Hayward is also currently one of the top few most overpaid in the league, and definitely Boston's most overpaid, getting $32 million this year. Don't get me wrong, I'm a fan of Hayward, but he just doesn't fit on the Celtics team. Maybe he'll do better with Boston changing things up, but if not, it's probably time for a trade. Then the Nets spot clearly goes to Kevin Durant because, I mean, this video is based on this season, and KD's going to be paid $37 million this year to be out with an Achilles injury. Even if this wasn't based on this season though, Durant's contract could come up as questionable down the line since he was given a near max deal, and we don't know just how good he's going to be when he returns. Either way though, I 100% don't blame the Nets for giving it to him, because it was a risk they just had to take. Besides him though, the Nets are in a great salary position because after Kyrie and KD, the next highest paid on the team is Spencer Dinwiddie, making $10 million next season, and then DeAndre Jordan making $9 million. But the Hornets aren't in the same position. Even though some people aren't a fan of Terry Rozier's nearly $20 million a year that he got, he's still nowhere near as overpaid as Bismack Biyombo, who's still making $17 million a year, and Nick Batum making $25 million. So I think both of these guys gotta take co-most overpaid for this team, because Biyombo's only putting up 4.4 points a game, and Batum's only averaging 9 a game. I mean, no wonder Kimba left. On the Chicago Bulls, Otto Porter's the most overpaid, with him still being on that bad former max contract where he'll be making $27 million this season. That's $8 million more than Zach LaVine, and more money than guys like Anthony Davis, Giannis, Rudy Gobert, Victor Oladipo, and Draymond Green. And if you remember, it was actually the Nets that offered Otto his 4-year, $100 million contract, and the Wizards that matched it. And it's crazy to think that if they didn't match the Nets offer, then they most likely wouldn't have made one of the biggest turnarounds of all time. As for the Cavaliers, I'll start off by saying they have way too many overpaid players. I mean, Kevin Love's making the slightly questionable $28 million, Tristan Thompson with $18 million, and Brandon Knight's getting paid $15. Plus, J.R. Smith was making $15 million before they waived him, and the spot would have gone to J.R., but since he's off the team now, it easily goes to Brandon Knight. Then there's the Dallas Mavericks, who've done a good job with the money that they pay out. And I don't think anyone is too overpaid, but if I had to give the spot to someone, Tim Hardaway would take it for making $18 million this year. Another team that's great with their money is the Nuggets, that surprisingly decided to accept Paul Millsap's $30 million team option, keeping him as the highest paid on the team for now, and the 19th highest paid player in the league. And honestly, I think it was a great move. They've got the money to spend this season, they don't need another star or really any more role players, and clearly his veteran leadership is worth it with this young roster. And then the Pistons have been pretty good with their contracts too, except for Reggie Jackson, who they'll be paying $18 million to this season. And they were the ones who overpaid him years ago in the first place. And as for now, I mean, they just signed Derrick Rose on a contract for $7 million this year, so Reggie's gonna be making almost triple what Rose will make on the same team. So you know that the Pistons have to know this man is overpaid. And it's gonna look even worse if Derrick Rose comes out to be the one to start, which I hope he does, but I could also see him coming off the bench this year. The Golden State Warriors really have no one overpaid on the roster, which is great because, I mean, outside of Clay, Draymond, Steph, and D'Angelo Russell, their next highest paid is Kevon Looney, making $4.4 million in 2019 and 20. Then the Houston Rockets' most overpaid is Russell Westbrook. And this one's not hate on Russ, but the Rockets don't really have anyone else who's overpaid. And Russ is on a supermax extension that only the Thunder could have given him, and now he doesn't even play there anymore. He's also tied as the second highest paid player in the league, over Harden, Durant, LeBron, and everyone else not named Steph Curry. Don't get me wrong, he definitely deserves big money, but compared to everyone else in the league, $38 million this season is too much. Unlike them, the Pacers are a team that hasn't overpaid anyone, and has done a great job of handling all the salaries on their team. And the same goes for the Clippers. Their next highest paid besides Kawhi and PG is Patrick Beverley, who's only making $12 million and took less money to stay in Los Angeles. And the way they've perfectly managed salary so far is one of the reasons they're championship favorites this year. And the Los Angeles Lakers are in pretty much exactly the same boat. Like them, the Miami Heat are another team in a great money position. And I would say no one on the team was overpaid, because even though Goran Dragic is gonna make $19 million next year, I like what he brings to a playoff team. But since they tried to trade him, it shows that the Heat don't, so we'll say they're overpaying him. The Minnesota Timberwolves are a different story, because they got a few overpaid players, like Gorgie Jang, who for some reason was given a contract that's gonna pay him $16 million this season, Jeff Teague's getting $19, but no one beats out Andrew Wiggins bringing in $27 million this year, which makes him the 27th highest paid in the league, and paid slightly higher than Karl Anthony Towns. The Memphis Grizzlies, on the other hand, were the ones overpaying Chandler Parsons for the longest time, but finally got rid of his bad contract this season, so now they really don't have an overpaid player. Jonas Valanciunas is the team's highest paid at $16 million this year, but the man put up 20 and 10 in the 19 games he played after getting traded there, and besides him and Andre Iguodala, who's gonna be traded, everyone else is on good deals. Then as for the Milwaukee Bucks most overpaid player, it's gotta go to Chris Middleton. I completely understand why they offered him so much money, because he's a great fit on the team, is still improving and plays good with Giannis. But he's a second option that just became a first-time All-Star and will now be making $30 million, which puts him as the 6th highest paid small forward in the NBA. Let's just hope he develops more and makes this deal more justifiable down the line. On the New Orleans Pelicans, they're going to be paying one of the most underrated players in the league in Drew Holiday $26 million, which is probably a little much, but he does a ton for them on both ends. And a guy that doesn't do as much as he gets paid for is the newly signed Derek Favors, who was a great pickup for the Pelicans because they got him for next to nothing, and he could make a huge improvement this year with this team. But for now, with what we've seen from him and him getting $17 million a year, we'll say he's more overpaid than Drew. Then there's the New York Knicks, who missed out on everyone, but surprisingly didn't really overpay anyone afterwards. I think the guys that they did sign were brought in on good deals compared to what they can and will bring to the table for the team. The Washington Wizards aren't as lucky though, because even before John Wall's devastating injuries, I don't know how much he was really worth a supermax extension. But now that he had heel surgery and ruptured his Achilles in the season right before the extension kicks in, it clearly makes him one of, if not the most overpaid in the entire NBA. His entire game's based off of explosiveness, and now that a lot of that will be gone, flat out isn't good for him or the Wizards. And neither is the fact that he'll be getting paid $38 million, tied with James Harden and Kevin Durant, as the 3rd highest paid player in the league, just to sit out with injuries for most of this year. As for OKC, their current most overpaid player is clearly Chris Paul, who's right up there with John Wall for the worst contracts. And I gotta say, I said he was extremely overpaid when he got his contract, and there was a lot of people who said I was wrong because Houston needed to keep him to beat the Warriors. Well, would you look at how things turned out? Everyone who said that, you know who you are. And currently CP3 is tied with Westbrook as the 2nd highest paid in the league, also getting $38.5 million. Then the Orlando Magic aren't a good team, but surprisingly don't have too many bad contracts anymore. One could say Markelle Fultz's deal is terrible, but I think it's worth paying him for the small chance that he works things out. If I had to pick someone for them though, it's gotta go to Evan Fournier, getting $17 million. The Philadelphia 76ers this summer gave a near max deal to Tobias Harris. A max would have been 5 years, $190 million, but Philly gave him 5 years and $180. And that's a huge investment for a guy that's never even been an all-star. I do think it can be worth it for them in the long run though, because he can really fit in any role that Philly needs him to. Plus, he's a great spot-up shooter, which I feel played a part in why Philly kept him over Jimmy Butler. But I just think that currently for where Philly's at right now, they had to overpay to keep him, and they did. But he's got a lot to live up to now that he's one of the 10 highest paid players in the NBA. Then up next is the Phoenix Suns, and the fact that they're still going to be paying Tyler Johnson $19 million this year. And the thought of that still bothers me. He's never averaged over 13 a game, and I can't see him getting anything more than maybe $7 million a year on a new contract. The Portland Trailblazers most overpaid goes to Hassan Whiteside, who was Miami's problem for a while, but now he's looking to be a good asset for the Blazers. He's going to be one of the league's highest paid bench players, making $27 million in the last year of his near max contract, and still won't be anywhere worth that kind of money for Portland, but given their situation, I think it was still a good pickup. then the Sacramento Kings are in a good situation. Because, I mean, Harrison Barnes would have been the Kings' most overpaid player, making $25 million in 2019 and 20, but since he declined his player option and got a new deal that's giving him $18 million, on top of the fact that the rest of the Kings core are all on pretty much rookie deals, they have no overpaid players. As for this Spurs spot, we gotta give it to DeMar DeRozan, for the fact that they're paying him $27 million this year. Of course he got that contract when he was a star on Toronto, but he's not really that kind of a star on the Spurs anymore. Don't get me wrong, he's still great, but not at the level he was in Toronto, which is why I could see him deserving to get paid a little less. But speaking of the Raptors, DeRozan's former duo partner Kyle Lowry is way overpaid. It was always questionable while playing with DeRozan what kind of star he was and if he made too much money, but he made it clear this postseason that he's not a real star player and shouldn't be getting paid $34 million, and definitely shouldn't be the fourth highest paid point guard and paid more than Kawhi Leonard, Paul George, and Klay Thompson. So it's going to be interesting to see the kind of money he gets on a new deal. And finally, the Utah Jazz most overpaid is Mike Conley. Mike's been in these discussions every year since he signed his 5-year, $150 million deal. And he was really one of the first names to get that kind of big money. But since getting it, he's still never been an all-star and is getting $32 million this year. Don't get me wrong, I like Conley, and even more so now that he's on the Jazz, but he's still not worth nearly $32 million. And that's everybody. So comment down below who you guys think is the most overpaid in the entire league, and I'll catch you next video.